We are live tonight with some brilliant women that I'm really excited for you to talk with. I will have them introduce themselves because we have this weird one screen, so you can see them as they talk about themselves. But I'll have them introduce themselves, and then I'll kind of talk about a couple of things to expect tonight, and then we'll get rolling on some really fun conversation. So we've decided that we'll answer questions in the order that our books came out. So Leigh Statham will be first, and then Katarina Boudreaux, and then Jennifer Bardsley. Jennifer Bardsley / Louise Cypress is her pen name. So go ahead, ladies.
I guess you want me to introduce myself first then.
Yes.
I'm going to jump on that. I'm Leigh Statham. I've written Daughter 4254 and Imani Unraveled, which is part of a series. And the new book, Girls of War, comes out March 9th. So watch for that. All from wonderful Owl Hollow Press. I live in North Carolina, and I have lots of kids and dogs and lots of books. And I teach high school English, and I also write lots of things other than young adult, but that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Hello, I think I'm next, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Katarina Boudreaux. I am in New Orleans. I wrote Platform Dwellers, and the sequel will be Platform Dwellers 2 will be coming out. I am a music and dance teacher, specifically tango and ballroom dance. I teach kids music. I have one son and a multitude of cats. I got a bread maker for the holidays, and I'm really digging that right now. I've written several collections of poetry, and enjoy working on music for my band. Name is Fugue, and we are creating a second album that hopefully will release this year as well. And that's me. And on to
Okay, my name is Jennifer Bardsley. I also write under the pen name Louise Cypress, which is what Narcosis Room is published under. And the sequel to Narcosis Room comes out later this fall. I'm excited about that. I also write adult romance, and I have a series coming out this summer from Montlake called Harper Landing, and the first book is Sweet Bliss. But I started in young adult, and I love young adult. I live in Edmonds, Washington, which is near Seattle, and I write a newspaper column. I have 2 kids, and I'm a Girl Scout leader.
Awesome, thank you. All such interesting people. You should look them up on social media and follow them. So a couple of things. I'm really excited to be here tonight because this is one of my favorite topics. I think science fiction is so interesting. It does so many different things. These are the 3 of the authors here tonight are YA futuristic, and they all have such different takes on that. And it's so fascinating that you can do so many things within one genre. So we're going to cover a little bit of that tonight. But as listeners, I want you to be thinking about a question as we talk. Is science fiction more in the world building or the plot? I want you to think about it and talk about it in the comments, and we'll kind of circle around back to that because they have some really insightful things to say. So the first thing I'd like to do is for each of you to tell a little bit about your book that we're here talking about tonight, about its world and the central problem or solution that it's offering.
Well, Daughter 4254 is dystopian, so everyone's pretty familiar with that now. It's a little different than what we're living today, but my thesis for the book was, or my what if question was, what if art was illegal? What if color, music, dance, all those things that we creative people live for, what if they were illegal? And then I thought, well, what if you were a creative person stuck in that world? And then it goes from there. And there's parents dying and evil leaders and all the great things you want in a dystopian novel, like in the first chapter. And of course, there's also a love triangle, and it just goes from there and snowballs into more. But I really enjoyed exploring like what it would mean to a creative person to lose all of that, and how could you find ways to express yourself. How would you fight the man to get what you needed as a creative person? And that's the gist of it.
So Platform Dwellers is based about 100 years post now, after a moralist revolution where all technology is destroyed and a pretty wicked virus wipes out the population on Earth. So the only survivors are on platform oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico, but actually more spread out. There's a series of platforms because there's many in the Caspian Sea and what have you. And they're run by a planning commission, which were the founding fathers. And on this one platform is Jo, who's a teenage girl who's super interested in communications and in science and in really making a difference in her crumbling world. The biggest problem is that they don't have enough resources, and so most of their technology has to be reinvented to create electricity, water from a dwindling base. And then while they're trying to survive in this environment, they realize that they've been lied to. And so here they are on a very structured, very limited situation. And then what do you do to solve that problem? Well, you have to go find answers. And it actually brings them to land, and nobody's been there for 100 years. And so the answers all lie in trying to see what is there and what possibly isn't.
Okay, I guess I'm next. I was just quickly texting my daughter to control the dog who's now barking. But Narcosis Room is a sci-fi thriller, and it's based on this concept I read that actually happened. It's a horrible thing in medical and psychological history where there is this doctor who would take depressed housewives and he would put them to sleep with like big drugs for up to 3 months. This happened in England. And then he would administer shock treatment to them, and it was called narcosis. And after about 3 months, they'd either wake up and their depression would be gone, they would be psychologically traumatized for life, or sometimes they would even die. So that was the idea behind Narcosis Room. But in my version, narcosis actually works, and you can have all of these weird things done to you while you're asleep. So you could have plastic surgery, you could have psychological treatment, you could have what was called psychic driving, where you have repetitive messages played into your brain so you can rewrite your thinking. And so in my world, it takes place in Seattle, and the main character is Ellie, and her parents are the doctors who run the narcosis room, and she thinks they are brilliant, but she doesn't realize that how much narcosis she's actually gone under.
Awesome. Those are awesome descriptions. You can see why these are so fascinating, right? They all have different elements completely. So I want to ask you as authors, and especially in this genre, what is it about dystopian or futuristic fiction that people are drawn to? I mean, we have hugely popular examples like Hunger Games and Divergent, or the Match series, or The Giver. So do you think there are specific themes or emotions or fears that pull YA readers into these?
Yeah, I definitely think there are. Especially in the young adult arena, most of the books have the same theme of young adults conquering evil, right? Whether it's an evil government or evil parents or evil something, it's a young person that is succeeding against overwhelming odds. And I think that, and even when you go back in time to like the first dystopian type novels, it's a story. It's almost a hero's journey every time. It's someone conquering. And in young adult, I think most kids are they look for outlets when they're afraid of something. They look for an entertainment outlet, whether it's a horror movie or a scary book or anything like that, to show them that it's possible to conquer those fears and things. I think that's like why it's a genre that's been popular forever, and I don't think it will go out of favor anytime soon.
I agree. I feel like specifically young adults, to figure out who they are, need to figure out who they aren't. And a lot of times when they're looking at characters placed in situations that are out of the lens that they can see on a daily basis, where nothing ever changes really, like they have no control over, you have to go to school, you have to do these things, if you don't make this grade, then you're not going to go here or there. When they can take themselves as readers out of that particular constricting situation and see an entirely new world where the choices, have bigger consequences, and they see how those characters react or don't react, then it helps young adult readers feel who they are inside and how they would react. And I think it helps them cement a lot of the choices that they make in a world where they don't really have a lot of choice. I also think that's why a lot of, at least my students, have begun doing a lot more like Dungeons and Dragons, where you can create your own story, because it's also part of being able to reinvent yourself and lay claim to attributes you probably wouldn't in just a general normal situation in your life.
Well, you guys covered the dystopian part, so I'll speak to the science fiction. And I think it's this fascination readers have with, would science make things better or worse? And usually it's a little bit of both, because and when we can see this in our own life, we have these wonderful things that science and technology have brought us, but they come with a cost. And that's the really exciting thing about science fiction to me, is when authors get to explore, what is that cost?
That's a great answer.
Oh, such good answers, all three of you. Thank you. So brilliant. We have a couple of questions from viewers. First, Shannon says, Daughter 4254 was the first book from Owl Hollow that she read. So super exciting. Beth asks, how much science background or training do you think an author needs to have to be credible in the storytelling? Is too much science a bad thing or a turnoff for readers?
I think you can look to The Martian for an example of that. The Martian, the author wasn't like well versed in everything, but a whole society, like a whole group of scientists and physicists chimed in there to make sure that the science was correct for that book. And that's a lot of science, right? Math, there's all kinds of like hardcore stuff in there, and it's still a great book. So I think it depends on delivery. I think as long as you have a great plot, having that realistic science in there it never goes wrong for me. Like, I love it when it's actual science that's a real thing, like Jennifer's book, that the narcosis room was a real thing. Creepy, but for real.
I would second that. I think for me, writing, it depends on how much research I'm willing to do and how many questions I'm willing to ask people who are, professionals or do have the knowledge that I need. And basically, if I can understand it and if I can grasp the technology that I need to make something happen, even if it's not a real thing, then I'll be able to efficiently write about it. But it does take time. And I think specifically for platform dwellers, really understanding how, communication works when you don't have a phone or when you don't have a GPS, I don't know about you, but when I'm driving, I'm constantly have my Google Maps on just because I want to know what the traffic looks like. Well, what if there's not such a thing? Like, there's no network. Like, you can't call a business or a house 1 mile from you. Like, how do you make that work when there's no network, or there's no existing system? And so I think finding those answers actually made me a more intelligent person in a lot of ways. There's so much technology out there that I don't actually know about. So that's the answer. I think it depends on how much you're willing to dig and how much you can stretch yourself.
I'm muting myself. I think that the science, if someone with a true science background can have the ideas spark from the actual science and not have to be someone like me who reads about it in a book and comes up with the idea, but maybe you studied something that gave you the idea of a fictional world to explore. So I think that I love reading books that are written by actual scientists. I also like them from psychology majors, but Yeah, that finding that balance can be really exciting to readers.
Those are all excellent answers. One example I love is Elon Musk. He got excited about science from fiction, and now he's literally changing the world. He's making science fiction into science reality. And so I think that's a lot of the power that it has, is you ask these questions and you challenge the status quo, and you all gave really excellent answers. Thank you. Katie asks, as you are world building, do you start with conflict, plot structure, or characters?
Can you ask that again? You glitched out for me for a second. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Katie asks, as you all are world building, do you start with conflict, plot structure, or characters?
I always start with conflict and then characters, and then everything else fills in. I almost always start with a what if, and then and then from there I can see the people that are dealing with that problem, and I build them, and then everything else just sort of falls into place for me.
Characters. So characters, because even in the best worlds, like if I don't have those strong characters and the relationships that just make you or break you inside when you're reading them. So I do characters. I mean, I have the world, but characters, and then sort of the conflict and the plot structure comes from the choices, from the what if question that they have, but characters. I like my people.
I always start with what's called the elevator pitch, which is what they tell authors, like if you were trapped in an elevator with a publisher and you could just deliver your pitch to them in one line, what would it be? And for Narcosis Room, it was sleep for 3 months and wake up perfect. I think later we changed it to sleep for 3 months and make your problems go away. But the same idea is I start with the main concept or the hook of the book, and then I move on to the characters, and I think about each character. They each need to have a problem to solve and a flaw, and I go from there.
Excellent answers.
You know, I actually had that experience once, Jennifer. I ended up in an elevator, just me and a dream agent. And guess what I pitched? Nothing. Like, wasn't that a great luncheon we had?
I'd like to sleep for 3 months. Can I get on board that? Oh.
Great answers. Just a reminder to those of you listening, leave your comments and questions as we go. Carrie's monitoring the comments, and we'll ask the questions that you have for the authors. So don't be shy. Feel free to write in as we go. So one of the questions, we've talked a lot about some interesting aspects of science fiction and dystopian and futuristic. What do you think the responsibility is of those genres? Do you think they have more of a responsibility to discuss politics and environment and big issues and world problems? Or what's the line between reading for escapism and reading to think about our world's bigger picture?
Now I'm not so sure I want to be first every time. I think the responsibility of authors, you meant of authors, right? Writing of this stuff?
Either way, whatever. Am I frozen or are you frozen?
We were all frozen, but now we've become unfrozen.
Okay. Very good. I feel like Leigh somehow engineered that so she could have a second, because she doesn't like this.
She's still frozen.
Oh, is she?
Jennifer, I see.
Okay. Do one of you two want to take it until she comes back?
Okay. So that's an incredibly convoluted and lots of harmony in that question. Let's just say that. A lot of voices going in there. So here's what I think. I did not originally think that I was going to write in a young adult format. The reason I chose it is because it gave me a forum to speak about issues that I feel are very pressing, in a way, in a science fiction way that takes it out of the realm of normality, right? To give a different perspective, to look at it in a different light, to use a synonym for what's happening. And unfortunately, like I talked about a virus wiping out humanity, and I, of course, did not mean that to really happen, but it is one of the things, like, how far, what does this mean in a world that you're creating new life from, a scientific fashion, and to have a conversation about that, or to have a conversation about people who are unable to see beyond their own beliefs. When you put it into a different realm, then you have a different scope that you can look at it at. I think the responsibility of every author is to create characters that make your readers question their own beliefs. Whether that is because you are making them question it in the way that you want to, or think that's the way it's going to go, just to question in general. I think reading in general is to make you question and reobtain what you feel. Yep. So I think that's the responsibility, is if you're writing things that don't make anybody question anything, then good for you. But for me, my goal is to write something where people are going to question either the way they treat others, or the way they treat themselves, and the way they treat the earth around them. I hope that's a decent answer. I think it's a challenging question, because I don't think there is an easy answer.
I'll go next since Leigh was frozen. I think that my main role as an author is to entertain, and that people have spent their money to buy my book. I need to deliver something that's going to take them out of their living room into someplace else that makes them feel happy, inspired, entertained, makes them think. And from that point, I think science fiction can really help them travel into a different dimension. I mean, space opera books actually do travel to a different dimension. But a book like Narcosis Room is something more like, it could happen, but it hasn't. So, and I also think the science, or whatever you're presenting, has to be just real enough that it could actually, maybe not actually happen, but like, you have to get that part right. You have a responsibility to not be, not to treat that in an authentic way. So, and for me, Narcosis Room takes place in Seattle. So I had to get that part right to the location.
Great answers. Leigh, did you have anything to add, or do you want to move to the next one?
Oh, I thought those were great answers. I feel like my responsibility as a young adult author is to entertain and inspire young people, whether they're, no matter what age you are reading my books. I want to entertain you on the surface, and if you dig deeper, hopefully inspire you to, and in Daughter 4254 in that series, it's inspiring you to find your own art, find your own voice, and be grateful for what you have, basically. But yeah, I'm more of an entertainer.
Jennifer Eaton says, thank you to Jennifer, and also probably Leigh, because she said it before you answered, but I don't want to read anything unless I'm entertained. So I think that's a big part of it. Some really good questions. Beth asks, do you think there are some things that should not be written about? Virus stories right now, for example.
Has she read your anthology?
Probably first in line to get it.
I think there are some things that are really hard to write about. I think timing is really important. Timing is everything in every genre and every career, right? It's who you are, what you're doing, and where you're at, and who you know. I think the important thing to remember, though, is that you need to write what you need to write. Like, there's a story that you need to tell it. It might not get sold, but if you don't, you're shortchanging yourself.
I second that, as somebody who pre-wrote a book about a virus. I think that as a storyteller, man, when something hits me, I gotta write about it. I'm up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, wheels turning, and it's like I just have to get it out of my head. So I don't think any topic is taboo for personal writing. I mean, I think if it's there in your mind, for me, it's also partially therapy. If I have all these ideas, I got to get them out, or they get stuck in the wheels. You know what I mean? And suddenly I'm trying to make breakfast, and I'm going like, what if? So it's better to write them down and to have them there, and maybe something will come out of them. I do agree with you. I think what's hot and what isn't is just really part of what the market is at the day and the time. But definitely just right.
I'll speak specifically to the pandemic because this really hits close to home for me. I had the book for Narcosis Room, the sequel, already finished in I think 2018, 2019, and it's called Quick Fix, and it's about 3 teens thwart a bioterrorist plot to destroy Seattle using a diet drink that kills. That is the hook. But it's about a virus that starts in Seattle. I wrote this all before the pandemic. A virus that starts in Seattle and quickly spreads everywhere. So then this book was supposed to come out like in March 2020. And so Emma and I and my agent, we all conferred. We're like, okay, maybe we should just hold off on a little. And also what's interesting is that Amazon has really tried to crack down on COVID misinformation at the same time. So there were lots of people who thought they were going to make a quick buck writing books about the pandemic. And so there were even like keywords in there for COVID, pandemic, coronavirus, where the Amazon would yank your book off, the platform for selling, which for a small publisher could be devastating. So that was all part of our reasoning. It was like, let's just hold off a little bit. But specifically for the pandemic, that's something to think now that I write adult romance as well. Is like, do you want to read a romance book where people are wearing masks and like there's social distancing? And some people are writing that, but I'm not. Like in my little Harper Landing series that's coming out, in my little town, I should say, it's a small town, the COVID has not hit. So it's just escapism. People don't want to go to the beach and read a COVID romance story. At least I don't think they do. I don't want to write it.
There's no good lip action with masks. You can't do it. Some really good questions.
You're not doing it right.
We could talk about this all day. Katie asks, when you're writing dystopian fiction especially, how do you address your what if questions without coming off overly moralistic or self-righteous?
My what if question was, what if art was illegal, and creativity, what if, so the premise is that it's post-apocalyptic, the planet's been wiped out, they have very few resources, and so the humans rebuilding make a law that all resources must go towards rebuilding. You can't use your time or your energy or anything for anything that's not of use. But they keep that law even into like a few decades in, where they don't necessarily need to keep that law, but they maintain that and they hold on to it. And I was I was writing from the point of view of I'm an artist and a writer and musician, and I had been reading about like the Cultural Revolution in China, where they were burning art and literature, and this has happened in history before several times, where cultures have like decided what's okay and what's not creatively. And so yes, and on one hand, I'm being self-righteous and judgy and saying that I think this would be horrible and I don't think I could survive, and the main character, has a lot of my passion poured into her to fight against a world like that. But on the other hand, I think that that's part of being an author, though, right? Is dumping your own feelings and point of view into something. I heard that And I wish I could remember who this quote was from, but they said that literature is the last vehicle for empathy. And I really believe that. So I think it's important to put your own bias in there.
I like that word, empathy. I feel like the way, I don't believe that I sounded over moralistic or the book or the characters came across, because I made it personal. I think when you're looking at a character that has something done without their approval to them, that something is taken from them, there is a deep sense of human empathy, that it's wrong for anyone to have something taken from them without their consent. I feel the same way about information, that if you're told a lie, then I think, generally speaking, we don't feel like being lied to is a positive thing. So I guess that's my answer, is I make it personal and I try to make it realistic, and that those are two things that people can what is the word I'm looking for? What is that they can vibe with, that they have experience with in their life. Like, no one feels like it's a good thing to be lied to, and nobody feels like it's a good thing to have something taken away without approval. But that is actually a really great question, and I'd like to reread the book to see if it does come across that way. Interesting. I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's my answer. Make it personal.
I'm going to go in a totally different direction about morals, and mine is cleanliness or steam level in YA books. Because if you look at the genre of YA books, they go from like squeaky clean, won't even say damn, for example, all the way up to super steamy, lots of X-rated scenes. And especially, a lot of people don't know that a major market for young adult books is adult women reading the book. So they don't care if it's rated G or rated R, like they just want a page turner. And for me personally, like, I think that there's room in the genre for all those different types of books. I have no judgment, but for me personally, like, I try to stay on the clean side of things. I don't think I have any F-bombs. I have a few bad words. There's some kissing, things like that, but probably like PG, like 1980s PG, 1990s PG. And it always makes me feel so much better. Like, whenever my mother-in-law reads one of my books, I'm like, phew, there's nothing embarrassing, right? And I do that across all of my books, all of my Louise Cypress books, my romance books, my Jennifer Bardsley Harper Landing books. It's all fairly clean. So sweet romance, even if it's sci-fi, it's still fairly sweet.
Those are all really good answers. I like that you each come at it from a different angle. I think that makes it a really interesting conversation. There's a couple of other good ones, but I kind of want to touch back to a question we had talked about earlier amongst us that Katarina hit on, but choice is a huge component of YA lit in general, but sci-fi and futuristic and dystopian in particular, a lot of times that involves choices being taken away. But what do you think the implications are for both positive and negative for characters and having choices given or taken away based on where teens are in their development?
I think Katarina hit the nail on the head earlier. I think the teenagers especially, well, I mean, developmentally from birth on up, you have very limited choices, right? Until you get out on your own. But I think it's felt most strongly for teenagers and kids the age that are reading young adult books. So that, I think that's that's why it's such a popular genre, and that's why the books are successful that are, because they deal with that, and all of our books deal with that. And a lot of times the choice is just, how am I going to deal with this situation, right?
Absolutely. And I think specifically in the last year, those choices have become fewer and fewer. in many, many ways. And so I have noticed a lot of, specifically my students have been delving deeper and deeper into unknown worlds because there is so little choice in the world now. Are you going to go to school? That's not your choice. Are you going to be homeschooled? Are you going to be on Zoom for school? That's not your choice. And then I also feel like a lot of them have suffered from being told what to think about politics from a parental standpoint. So I think when you're given a choice, they don't know what to do with it sometimes. Specifically, their days are mapped out. So I think when you're given a choice, it's wonderful to see how characters react, because then you can temper as a young person how you react in those similar situations. This is how this feels. I'm not really given a whole lot, but look how this person did it. I wonder how, what would it be if I made a stand about something, or if I decided I wanted to speak up about something, right? Versus when a choice is taken away, there's some really great ways to react to that in a societally approved way. And there's some really terrible ways to react to that. And I think we're seeing a generation of young kids who don't have an outlet. And so providing worlds for them where they see what can be done helps them through a time where there's very little hope for them at the moment.
Well, for mine, for Narcosis Room, it deals with brainwashing. So the choices of even knowing who your own brain is and who you are as a person has been taken away from the main character through the process of Narcosis Room. But actually, a lot of my books have to do with brainwashing. My first book, Genesis Girl, was about brainwashing because it was about a girl who grew up in a cult. And even when I look through the course of all my books, even Sweet Bliss, which is coming out this summer, which is an adult romance book, the main character has all these things that she believes about herself, like that she's the small town girl and things like that her mother has told her that turn out to not be true. So I think that whole idea of choice and what you're told as a child and what you grow to believe about yourself, which may or may not be true, that is a big theme of my books, and I think a big theme of young adult dystopian books.
Do we need an intervention, Jennifer? Are you trying to tell us something?
I feel like you're trying to figure out who you are at every age. There's always new ways to figure out what you are and what you believe, and so go Jenny.
Oh wait, I just have to add, because I just thought of it. This is funny. In my vampire books, I wrote a whole series of paranormal vampire books. And then the first book, Morgan doesn't know she's a vampire, right? So like even that choice has been taken away from her.
Maybe she does need an intervention. We'll let you deal with that, Leigh. That's awesome. Those are great answers. Okay, a fun question from Nicole. She says, sci-fi readers love cool tech, from lightsabers and pod racers. What cool sci-fi tech did you integrate into your stories and why?
So I like making up guns. And in all of the books I've written, my steampunk books and my sci-fi books, there's always like a weird weapon. And in my society, they've deemed weapons not of use because they don't want to fight anymore. They don't want to have anything that it's like no weapons of mass destruction or minor destruction are allowed. So they have these like glorified tasers that they use and they call them shock rifles. And some of them are actually as big as a rifle. The main character finds out later in the book. She doesn't even know that they have weapons like that. Most like the peacekeepers in her little community have like nightsticks, but they don't really even use those because everybody's so like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. So I made up shock rifles, these giant like tasers. They're not gonna kill you, but they're scary looking. And then also all of the homes are these pods. And I thought, wouldn't it be so cool to have like white pods against a green field? It was like, and I'm writing a book, right? But I can see it all in my head. And that was kind of fun, like this weird futuristic, like building material, everything's white. That's mine.
So mine was more like recreating what's already created so that it functions in a saltwater, high humidity, hurricane struck environment. I think probably the coolest thing is like for a food source, like if you're gonna go fishing underneath a rig, to have this globe of metal underneath where fish swim in, and you keep your own house supply of fish, you know, that you are, unfortunately, you're limited. You can't overuse your supply limit. Or basically how to recycle things over and over and over again. How to create clothing out of fishing nets, or how to reweave, how to patchwork things. Also communications wise, how do you connect devices when you have no wireless system? How do you move people on outer rings of platforms in cars that have been kind of like reworked and reworked and reworked electronically? And then the last thing is that they're all they have chips in them that the PC tracks them when they're on the rig, so they know where they are at all times. So maybe not like super cool saber technology, but super cool thinking science that gets young people thinking about the stuff they have around and how to work it. Like, how would you collect rain and make water and purify it if you had nothing? So more like survival 101 science.
I just want to say, I think one thing that Katarina did really, I thought was really cool is like there's this toothbrush water face wash dispenser, and you only get a certain amount. You have to key in your card, and then it gives you a little squirt of water. It was very cool. For Narcosis Room, like I said, the narcosis was based on a real thing, and also the psychic driving was based on a real thing. There was a Canadian doctor in the mid-century, last century, and he studied brainwashing, where they would put these football helmet things with like headphones on, again, oftentimes depressed housewives, women who had postpartum depression, and they would play messages like, "When I see a piece of paper on the ground, I pick it up. I love my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law wants to help me." Literally, these were the messages they'd replay to women, and it would be horribly traumatic to women. Like, they would come out and they would just be addled from this. But in Narcosis Room, it actually works. So like, you could go and you could take the SAT course and get all the SAT information put into your head, or you could get all of, whatever you need to know. You could learn a new language while you were under narcosis. So that was fun to play with. And then in the second book, Quick Fix, which hasn't come out yet, that was this whole idea of the diet drink that kills. So there's this elixir that's marketed as a probiotic elixir, where you can go in and you can get 3 different levels, and they each cost a different amount. And when you drink it, it's going to make you sick, for like a little bit sick for the first week, but you'll clear your system and you'll lose a bunch of weight. And it depends on how sick are you willing to get to lose that weight. And that there's a whole body positivity message in there too. I'm not advocating making yourself ill to lose weight, but that is part of the idea.
So really good answers and really fun books, really fun tech in all of them. Katie asks, do you ladies tend to plot your books, particularly those of you writing series, or do you make decisions for your characters as situations evolve? So how does your process change when you're carrying characters through multiple novels?
I've always been a pantser. I start with the what if, and then I develop my characters, and then I just go. I really love NaNoWriMo. I've written several books using that method. And then actually with Daughter 4254, I wrote the sequel, Imani Unraveled, using help from Wattpad readers. So that was really fun. Like, they read a rough draft of Daughter and then asked me these questions, and I wasn't going to do a series, but they convinced me to do it. And I just did it a chapter a week and wrote with these folks that were going back and forth with me. And it was really great. It was a great experience. Of course, that draft that was on Wattpad is very different from what ends up being published. And I think that's the problem when you're a pantser, is you start going down all these crazy directions and you have to backtrack. There's a lot of rewriting that happens when you don't plot ahead. But I can't seem to stop. I don't know how to plot ahead.
Yeah, word, I hear you. So platform dwellers, I definitely had to rewrite because of lack of like some tension and some plot, because I really wrote on characters and like how I foresaw, like, wanted the world to be and where I wanted it to go. The sequel I did a little bit more piecemeal just because of the way my life was, and then I did a complete rewrite on that. I'm working on something now where I actually have multiple books in my head. I'm not sure why. It could just be the 2 a.m. wake up, because I'm in the middle of this, you're middle of a pandemic and you wake up at 2 a.m. and you can't go back to sleep. And I'm like, hey, how about, and then suddenly I have like this entire like situation that I've been working on. It's like a gift because it's kept me sane working on with a definite plot. I think so. My answer on that question is it's situational. Lavender Dwellers was just for me such a wonderful world and wonderful characters. I just kind of wrote it, and then I wrote the second one. But what I'm working on now definitely has a prequel and like a sequel, and this is like the middle book, which is weird. I don't even know what's gonna like if I'll ever write them, but I know they're there.
Well, I started out my writing journey as a pantser and used to write like 23 drafts before I'd even show it to my agent. And I would so much revision, so much like in retrospect. I mean, no draft is wasted, but now I am a diehard plotter and I come up with the hook, then I come up with the characters, I come up with each character's problem, each character's flaw, and then I plot out the book. The drive to the goal, how does it get thwarted? The drive to the goal, how does it get thwarted? And then at the 3/4 mark, there's usually a big battle, like where everything's going to happen. The flaws have to be fixed. The problem has to be solved. There has to be a satisfying ending. And that really helps me a lot. And what I've learned is when you write a series, the first book is the hardest. But then if you're using the same characters or some of the same characters or the same world, each book you write in a series becomes easier and easier for me to write because I'm not reinventing the world. I'm not reinventing the characters. I already know these people. I just need to make them do tricks. And so, yes, I'm a plotter.
That's a good way to say it. And Jennifer, how many books have you written?
I don't really know at this point. I should count. I think like 13 or 14. It's hard to say because like 3 of them are coming out this year. Yeah. The one from Owl Hollow and 2 from Montlake. And then I have a third in that series that is still in process. So, okay. And then I self-published a bunch and then I had some from another publisher. So a lot. Yeah.
Go look at Jennifer Bardsley, Louise Cypress on Amazon. She's a machine. She bangs them out. But Candace says, yay for pantsers. And a lot of people chimed in on that one. So I think there's a solid camp either direction you go. So it's really interesting. Okay. One thing I would love to know is kind of going back to the beginning of talking about what your book is about and how big world issues kind of fit into that. Why do you think science fiction keeps evolving, and why do you think they continue to be relevant and interesting to readers?
I think that we love imagining what's coming next, just as humans, and it's exciting. I feel really weird that I have this in my hand every day, all day, because as a kid, I would read Ray Bradbury and I would read I almost said Ella Montgomery. I didn't mean that. I mean Lingle. Lingle. Yeah, no, it's heckin' that. But I'd read Madeline Lingle and Ray Bradbury and be like, wow, I can't wait for the day when I can like video call someone, and it was so exciting. And now I can, and look at what we're doing right here. I just feel like, and I say this all the time, my kids roll their eyes at me. I'm like, I love living in the future, right? So I think that's the draw, is that I can't imagine what's coming next, but I'm going to try. And I want to. I hope it's not my book that comes true, but it's exciting. I think it's fun to imagine those things, especially space travel. I cannot wait to get on SpaceX and go to Mars. Like, sign me up. That's what my retirement's going to. I don't even care if I die on the way. That's like a life goal for me. I can't wait to go to space.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned those authors. Madeline L'Engle was one I loved. I think what hooked me was, okay, don't you let, but did anybody ever read Piers Anthony, like the Fractal Mode series? Or he was hilarious, and he wrote an entire world called Xanth about puns. So it kind of was like my love of language plus, wow, that's an ogre with like half of this and half of that. And so and then I of course went full on into Tolkien and all these things that that you do. But I've actually lost sight of the original question because I enjoyed your answers so much. When I was sitting here thinking, and I was like, wow, The Wizard of Earthstein. Yeah, that was a killer book, and it probably influenced me. Oh yeah, how is it still evolving? I think what it is that two aspects of it. I'm going to say it's a two-pronged answer. The first one is that when there's lack of change, and I feel like we've been stuck, or like many young adults and even adults, they feel stuck, stagnant, lack of change. It's a freeing, entertaining, escapist thing to see a world where it's all change and nothing is familiar. And I think that's why it continues to evolve, because you have to do something that hasn't been done, right? And then I think the second answer for me is that from the beginning of time, we've tried to explain the unexplainable, and there's still so much unexplainable. It's the reason why we created mythology and gods and goddesses. And I think that now we have bigger questions, or more depthful questions, but those what ifs keep coming because we have this keen want to know all the answers. And it kind of, I think, helps us put into perspective that we don't, and neither do they, or whoever these characters are in the future. They still struggle, even though they have more answers than we do.
I think that sci-fi keeps evolving because what's hot in books goes in trends, and it was dystopian. YA dystopian was super hot when Divergent and Hunger Games came out. Paranormal vampire romance was big when Twilight was there. Now we're seeing a lot of contemporary fiction, and YA fantasy is huge. It goes in cycles, and each time it comes, authors take a little bit of a different, they chip away at it from a different angle. And that's exciting to me to see how it grows and evolves in those cycles of what readers are interested in.
Great answers. Okay, I would suggest that you ladies, if you'd like, get on and see the comments, because there's so many great comments that we don't have time to read all of them. But I think you should go in and see the interaction, because there's so many fun people on tonight. It's very exciting. But I'm going to kind of lump two questions together to kind of, as we wrap up. Nicole asks, readers always talk about their favorite characters. As the author, who is your favorite character in your book? So let's do that one, and then I'll do the second part.
I don't want mine to be a spoiler, but
Is that who I think it is?
I don't know. You can tell me, I'll tell you. Okay, so when the main character goes to secondary school, that's kind of a spoiler too, but she does end up going to the secondary school, and her roommate that's there is my favorite character. And she makes she makes a brief appearance in book 1. There's not much of her at all. I think there's a mention in book 2, but I brought her back full force for book 3. So if you guys liked that character, she carries in fact, she's the one who helped me write it. like I was so stuck and pantsing myself as much as I could. And I thought, you know what, I need to channel this character. And so I did. And I love her. And I'm so glad it worked well, because she's awesome. And I can't wait for you guys to read about her.
That's so hard because I'm torn. Like I said, I love my people. So Lizette, I love because she's the best friend that everybody wants, man. She's just spot on and lovely and supportive and yet interesting and smart and makes different choices. But I'm going to have to, at the end of the day, say Phlox because he's just hilarious. Phlox is larger than life, and I could totally see him rolling out here in New Orleans with like a chicken bone suit from Mardi Gras. I mean, like, I just love this guy. And he's so brilliantly insane that he's smart, and I just like him. Phlox. Phlox!
Good answer.
I'm going to go with Dean, who's one of the love interests in Narcosis Room. And he's a Canadian pop star who comes to the Narcosis Clinic because he has a lisp. And that was actually inspired. I was in speech therapy for years and years and years as a child because I couldn't say my R's or my S's. And so my whole idea was like, well, what if you could go to sleep for 3 months and you could wake up and that could be fixed? How awesome would that be? And so that was sort of fun. What I noticed when I started, now I'm talking about a list that's going to come back. I noticed when I was writing it that then all of a sudden it was like I had marbles in my mouth when I would leave the desk. Now it's happening to me again. Like there's definitely a psychological thing with it that just totally played into my book.
But I love that. I feel like how many people struggle with that type of thing and don't see themselves represented in the book. And you made him such a cool character, and it was really, really well done. So I love that. Good answer.
I think it's interesting that none of us picked our main characters.
Maybe we're just tired of them after so long.
I think they're too close to ourselves. My main character usually has more of my own traits, so I'm a little harder on them.
Interesting. That's a really great observation. Okay, we're gonna do prizes, but first, really quickly, I'd love for all of you to tell your top 2 or 3 must-read sci-fi books. Don't have to be YA, but
Jennifer, go first.
There we go, unmuted. I'm going to go for the classics. I remember reading 1984 as a child, and that just blew me away. But then there is also this series, I don't know if I still have it, Mind Hold by, I can't remember, but it was about telekinesis. And that just took something Belden. Can't remember the last name. That just blew me away as a kid. And the author came to my classroom. That was the other thing. It was so amazing. Kind of like, what was that? There was that movie. Oh, I can't remember that one of the, now I can't think of it. It was like all about telekinesis, like Escape from Witch Mountain. That was it. It's like it was just like that same genre. I thought was so cool.
good answers.
Yeah, now that you've brought it up, the Wizardiverse, that definitely changed my perspective as a young child, or as a young person coming into fantasy. I really liked the Broken Earth series. I suggested I loved the relationship between the daughter and the mother a lot, and I feel like that series stuck with me. I'm also a big fan of Ray Bradbury, specifically his short stories. But I don't know, if none of you have ever read Piers Anthony, go back in the collection, my people, and look up it's like early science fiction in the fractal mode. But I'll be honest with you, I look forward to reading more in the next year. I feel like this last year I've been reading Claude the White Crocodile and stuff like this, and really haven't been feeding my mind enough with new science fiction, and that is one of my real look forward tos in the next couple of months as things move forward and change. But those favorites will always stand out.
I just have to
Mind
jump
Hold.
on and say it was Mind Hold by Welaine Schneider Belden. So good.
That's awesome. I was trying to find my book. I do have I do have Fahrenheit 451 right here with my toilet paper bookmark. I would say Ray Bradbury as well. If you haven't read Ray Bradbury, you need to read The Martian Chronicles. Are really great. His short stories are fantastic. But I'm also gonna throw in a little love for Beth Revis. If you guys haven't read Beth Revis, she wrote Across the Universe. And she's a local North Carolina, also a teacher and an author. And that's just a really great like space adventure YA book. It's tons of fun, but yeah. Get Fahrenheit 451 if you haven't read it. And The Giver. Like, I can't not say The Giver. That's just I don't know. It's in my blood.
Yeah. Dandelion Wine, Ray Bradbury.
Oh yeah, that's really great. Dandelion Wine is more contemporary. And it's based on his memoir. And it was really interesting to read. That he also came out with a book that of short stories that it was the last book published before he died. That was in lots of authors contributed to it. It's pretty interesting too. I got out there. Anyway, it's up here somewhere.
I see up there like your Aragon book. Is that what I see? Yeah.
I've got I've got Cinders up there.
Yeah. Okay. It's so cool looking at the books behind you guys. I hate to say that, but I love it. I'm looking at like, oh, I want to read that. So
yeah.
Well, you guys are amazing. Jennifer says, Leigh has toilet paper, get her. That made me laugh. It's so appropriate right now. Also, there's tons of recommendations in the comments. You guys have been such great audience tonight. Thank you for all the comments and questions. We could probably go another 40 minutes, but we will not monopolize that much of your evening. But such good answers. Thank you to these lovely authors. I hope you learned something. I know I did, and I read all of these books, so that was really fun. And thank you so much, Jennifer and Katarina and Leigh. You are all lovely, and check out their books. They're so smart and interesting and fun. And if you didn't fall in love with them tonight, I don't know what's wrong with you. But anyway,
thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to our channel so you'll never miss an upload, or join us live every Thursday for author interviews, book clubs, writing advice, and more on Facebook at Owl Hollow Press, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. See you Thursday.